now, from the great state of Mississauga in Ontario, Canada, it's the Ted Wallachin Podcast. Brought to you by ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. ETP Canada. And Tom's Place, for the finest in men's fashion. Tom's Place will suit you. And now, here's Ted.
Thank you very much, Becky, and welcome everybody to the Ted Wallachin Podcast. I am him, and you are you, and we appreciate you being with us. I'm really happy this week to bring back a friend to the microphone, joining me at the microphone that I've interviewed a number of times over the years on the radio. This year, he celebrates his 40th anniversary in the world of entertainment. You may know him as That Canadian Guy, or you may know him by his real name, Glen Foster. He has appeared 8 times at the world-renowned Just for Laughs Festival, had his own television specials on the Comedy Network, and is a frequent guest on CBC Radio's The Debaters, and performs right across this country. His latest album, titled Unchecked, was recorded just prior to the COVID shutdown.
So here we are, 2020, which is approximately, I can't be exactly sure, but roughly 40 years since I first stepped onto a comedy stage. So, thank you. So by applause, how many people have actually heard of me before? Okay. So for the rest of you, I'm old and new. Not that old, not too old to have some fun. The other night we partied with these Swedish stewardesses and, well, Swiss chalet waitresses. Still. I hope I dressed so. See, it doesn't even matter what I wear these days. I just come off looking like a retired cop. I would not be a good cop. Well, no mind for detail, no memory. If we were out on patrol and there was an incident and I had to write a report about it, I'd just make the whole thing up. I would cheat off my partner right off the bat. Hey, what did you get for number of shots fired?
That is That Canadian Guy, Glen Foster, and his latest album, Unchecked, recorded, as we mentioned, just before COVID. So you'll note that the mention of the year 2022, I guess, 2021, whatever, I can't remember whatever the mention was.
2020. It was recorded in 2020.
So you must have gotten. How are you, by the way? Hello.
I'm okay. How are you? Good to see you. Virtually.
It's that whole COVID thing, it screwed up the entire entertainment industry. And I'm just wondering, when did you get a chance to record this? Like, how close to the beginning of COVID did you record this?
January 2020.
Wow.
So that was, 2 months maybe? When was it? February? Because my wife came back. My wife came back from, she had been touring Spain and Europe with her friend, Spain, France, and everywhere they went, COVID was like right behind. It's almost as though they were patient zero, So there was an outbreak following them around. And on the last night, I think February 16th, something like that, they stayed at the airport because they didn't want to have the hassle of getting from Paris to the actual airport. So they stayed at the airport. This is a 300-room hotel, and there were only 30 people in the entire hotel. And I had to pick her up from Montreal because Air France doesn't fly into Ottawa. So I had to drive. So knowing that she'd been in the COVID hotspot, it's almost as if a movie, the plane flies out and everything blows up behind her.
Yeah.
So I had to pick her up in Montreal, which I knew. I was like, okay, I'm going to have to be in the car with her for 2 hours. Right? Like if she's got picked anything. This is at the time when we were all terrified of COVID, and we're still a little, I suppose. But so it's ended up being my first TikTok to ever go viral, and it was me putting a shower curtain in the car between the front and the back seat. I took a mop and I wired it in, and I put a shower curtain across so that she could sit in the back seat, and I would drive her from the
Yeah.
airport.
So you cut it. You couldn't have cut it any closer because here in
No.
Ontario, literally the bars all shut down at midnight the night before St. Patrick's Day, which really pissed off all the Irish
Yeah.
pub owners because
February 16th,
they're
exactly.
getting ready for the big activities, and all the bars are shutting down. But you mentioned that you're in Ottawa now. Why did you move to Ottawa? And when, I mean, it makes sense. You're that Canadian guy. You should be in that
No, it makes
country's capital. I mean,
well, it makes no sense at all, actually, but the reason is because my wife's family is from
okay, all
Ottawa.
right. I figured you
So,
wasn't one of those sort
yeah,
of
we have lived in the GTA for, well, quite a long time.
yeah.
I've lived there since, Oakville, 77, but my wife and I decided to move. We'd already planned to move, kind of thing. It just happened that the timing was fortuitous in terms of real estate. I mean, we sold our property in Oakville pretty much at the height. I swear the boom ended the next
Mm,
day. You know, we had a bidding war, and then it
yeah.
was over. And so we moved to Ottawa kind of a little ahead of time because we had planned to when she retired, but we ended up doing it a little bit. Or built a house in
Mm,
Ottawa, and we actually rented in Oakville so my daughter could finish high school for a couple of
right.
years.
So it wasn't one of those
But
come for the Parliament building, stay for the convoy.
no, convoy didn't even affect me at all. I'm in the south end of
Yeah.
Ottawa, right? And so I mean, I didn't even notice, didn't hear a truck horn, nothing, right? But I love how you can still trigger people from Ottawa just by going.
That was pretty wild, though. You got to
It
admit.
was pretty
Yeah.
wild. I have a great bit about it, but it's generational. It's generational, so the kids don't get it, but you'll
Yeah.
get it, and all your fans will probably get it. Where I said, you know, I turned on the news. Well, first of all, I feel sorry for
Hmm.
anyone delivering anything legitimately by truck to downtown Ottawa. I mean, seriously, Ted, how'd you like to be delivering hot tubs or bouncy
Yeah.
castles or Confederate flags?
Well, is there a big business for Confederate flags other than during that couple of weeks?
So I said, so my bit was, I said, maybe this happened to you. It happened to me. I turned on the news. I saw the Confederate flag on Parliament Hill. And my first thought was, looks like them Duke boys is fixing to do some protesting.
Yeah.
A 50-year-old reference for you.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I got it. I got it.
No, I know you would get it
Yeah.
exactly, but the kids,
Yeah.
what? Oh,
You
good.
know, speaking of which, you've recorded what, 8 albums? Something like that?
Oh, no,
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 how
no,
many?
no,
5?
no. This next one will be my fifth, I
5th. Okay.
think. Yeah,
I was
yeah.
ahead of myself there for a little bit.
Which I'm kind of working on now. I'm sorting out material and everything else, and doing some tests.
When you listen back to those albums, do you think to yourself, "My God, how could I have said that?" In light of the way everybody thinks today.
Oh well, yeah, for sure. I mean,
And obviously, there's material from the past you can't do anymore.
oh, obviously, yeah. But what I've been doing lately is I've got because I'm a pack rat and I keep everything and I'm obsessive and compulsive, and I have video in various formats, about 30 years worth, because I've videotaped not every show I've done, but pretty much every show I've done.
Yeah.
And so I've just got this massive catalog of all these different tapes that I've been going through. And two things happen. One is what you mentioned, where I'll be looking at a bit and I'll go, "Ooh, there's no way I could do that bit now." Right. And the other thing that happens is I'll go, "Oh, why'd I stop doing that bit? That's a good bit. I
Yeah.
should bring that back." Right. And I actually brought back, I'm going to bring back a couple bits for my next album, actually. But yeah, so it's an interesting thing to look back at, and you can, and I can see the progression, or maybe we'll call it digression, of political correctness to wokeness. I can watch it, from 20 years ago, because I've been railing against this stuff for quite a long time, and it appears to have done no good whatsoever.
Some people think that comedians should have a different license than the rest of the world. That comedians,
Well, I
that
think so.
there should be no boundaries. That you should know going into a show that there's a chance that he may offend the minorities and those afflicted with disease and anybody. Anything is open. It's open country. It's everything's fair game. And if you say that and you tell people that, they should have no reason to be pissed off while they're sitting in the audience. Do you buy
Yeah,
that?
well, this is right. But some people, I think, I don't know if it happens so much. I think we're starting to see a bit of a turnaround, a
Yeah.
bit of a swing of the pendulum the other way where people are like, I mean, the wokeness, the PC, everything else it's not inherently a bad thing, but the way it's been abused
Hmm.
and overextended and just gone crazy to the point. Do you know you can be arrested for tweeting something quote hateful in Scotland? The police will come to you. They can't solve the local crime and the robberies and knifings and everything else, but tweet the wrong thing, and the police will show up at your door and arrest you. In Scotland,
Yeah. Okay.
bastion of freedom,
Now,
etc.
I have to tell you something. It's years ago, and I'm going back probably a half a dozen years or so ago. I was at a comedy club out in Burlington, and they had a number of comedians on. Nobody really stood out in my mind, but there was one guy who went in during the course of his 15, 20 minutes that he was on stage. He did about a 5.5 minute bit on rape, and I'm thinking,
Oh,
there's absolutely no way that there's anything humorous about rape, and yet some people were laughing. And he was
uh-huh,
getting a lot of booze and a lot of catcalls and a lot of profanity being hurled at him. He didn't care. He just went through
right.
the material, and I thought, how in good Lord, in good conscience, could you do that? Because
Well,
there's nothing funny about raping somebody.
not inherently, of course not, but this is the argument, right? That there, rape is a horror. There's all kinds of horrible subjects, but it doesn't mean that funny angles can't be found. And in fact, on Unchecked, there is a segment, rape and abortion, and one of the jokes is, oh, people are horrified now because really, Glenn, really, you know, a rape joke and then an abortion joke. And yet some people would say the only time you should allow an abortion joke is after a rape joke, right? So dancing around the subject, not directly on the
All
subject, and
right.
that's,
Okay.
you know what I'm saying?
Well,
So,
okay. Let me put it to
but
this
if you're
way.
going to do a graphic bit about raping somebody, that's a whole
Yeah.
other, and I'm not going to do
Exactly.
because I haven't
No.
seen the bit. I wasn't in the room. I always say if you're going to judge comedy, you had to be in the room. Not
True.
see it on video, be in the room, know
I
the whole
was
show.
in the room, and it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
not handled well. You're a lot
No.
more polished. You're a lot more experienced than this guy was, and you probably would have handled it a lot better.
Well, I do touch sensitive subjects, and it's not. I'm
That's
not all about.
cool.
I'm not trying to offend. I'm not like an edgelord. Oh, let's see how many people I can make leave the room. I mean, that's a thing in comedy. You used to call it walk the room. To go on and see how many people you could offend, and just clear out the room.
Yeah.
And I'm never been trying to do that, but I touch on certain subjects and so on that are sensitive or whatever, politically incorrect, and it's my whole thing is like a gentle poke the bear without trying not to get your head ripped off. It's kind of a little game for me, I guess, but I'm not trying to offend people.
How old are you now? You're in your 60s?
62.
62. So think back when you were like 25, just getting into comedy, all right?
Well,
And
you'd have to go younger than that.
okay, you're around 25, let's say. I'm not
Yeah,
talking
okay,
about your
sure,
first.
sure.
I'm not talking about your first date. I'm just saying your first gig. I mean, I'm talking about the fact that put yourself
Yeah,
in
I
your
was
shoes.
definitely rolling by 25, let's say.
And what would the audience have been like then responding to you as opposed to how do 25-year-olds respond to Glenn Foster, the 62-year-old?
Well, it's I have been over the last, and particularly since the pandemic. I don't know, maybe I was going through a dark phase or whatever. And again, all this, wokeness, political correctness we've been talking about. But what I have been finding is that there is a group of kids, the 25-year-olds, who are tired of all this, wokeness, political correctness, etc. And they just want you to be funny. And as long as you're not, deliberately hurting anybody type thing, what I have found and what I've been working on, and what comes across even more on my next album, or will come across, I hope, is this threading the fine line of, is that offensive? Is that, or is it my favorite jokes are so on the line that you can't really tell if you were offended.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've also been finding, again, with the material I'm doing lately that will be on the new album, finding a way to soften the fact that I am, it's basically a disclaimer. It's a disclaimer that I am an older, white, male. And then kind of lay it out that way, right? Anyway, I sense still a little bit of nervousness in the crowd, and I just want to set everyone's mind at ease. Yes, I am an older, white male, but I have recently had an opinionectomy. That's right, my opinions have been removed. And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Ask me what I think about transgendered athletes in women's sports. I don't. Critical race theory. These are 3 words. And before we continue, I feel it is important to acknowledge that this show is taking place try to think of some of my jokes as like a fart in church, okay? It's like momentarily uncomfortable and unpleasant and maybe offensive to a few, but ultimately harmless and generally hilarious. So it's all kind of relaxing. And so this whole theme of the opinionectomy kind of flows through the new album. It's the act I'm doing now is very, I'm a white male, but I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm opinionless, so I'm harmless.
Mm-hmm. Do you test your material out on your wife or anybody close to you and say, what do you think of this?
Not so much anymore. I used to do that with my ex-wife, and she's my ex-wife, so maybe that might.
Okay.
She used to do this. So when I would tell a joke to her, she would do this. She would do this, and she'd go, say, "That's me, the guinea pig in the little cage with you testing jokes on me."
You can't see it. He's mocking.
Nobody
can see this. There's no
that's
video.
Right.
Yeah, there's no visual attached here. But he's doing his impression of a guinea pig
in a cage.
Kind of look like a guinea pig, actually. Do you find that there's a problem dealing with because you like to deal with material that's contemporary, material that's fresh, stuff that's out of the news, and you've got a generation that's growing up that isn't really paying attention to newscasts, aren't reading newspapers, and in many cases not even listening to the radio.
Well, I guess they're getting their news from other sources type thing because, they're getting it off social media, whatever. So, I mean, if something is big news, it's going to filter through somehow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I myself, I can't remember the last time I watched the news, It's just something that I figure if it's important enough, it's going to reach me through osmosis, right?
And what about your political stance? Do you when you leave the stage, do people say, "Well, that guy's a raving conservative, that guy's a raving liberal"?
Oh, well, I think
or do you take an opportunity to insult everybody?
they take I'm pretty sure that they think that when I hit the stage. So it's not that I have to leave that impression. I come with that impression. But I guess what would have been in the old days a red Tory, right?
Yeah.
Which is fiscally responsible, but not personally fiscally responsible, but hoping my government would be, and but more socially liberal.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, my best man at my wedding was gay. For God's sakes, one of my best friend is gay. So I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I'm
You,
I'm I'm definitely very open minded on social issues, but I just think somebody should be watching the purse strings because nobody is.
I know, I know. You get the feeling that one day, like that, our children or grandchildren are going to wake up, and they're going to wake up to like that ugliest headline you've ever seen. We are officially broke,
Well, we are officially broke long ago. We're on borrowed
but I
money and
mean
borrowed
broke,
time from
broke,
other.
like broke to the point where nobody will lend you money. Broke.
Well, of course not. Yeah. This is what every time there's an announcement, they go, oh, the new $1 billion this program or the $1 billion that program. I'm like, well, obviously he's a drama teacher because he can't do math because there's only 33 million people in this country. And when you throw $1 billion at something, that's how many thousand per person? It just bothers me that there's just so much corruption and incompetence. But he has such nice. Here's the issue. Here's the Canadian. I think this is the political issue in Canada, and it remains the political issue. And that is, people may dislike Trudeau. They may outright hate Trudeau. They might despise Trudeau. But They fear the Conservatives. There are people who are afraid of Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah,
Afraid
yeah,
you know and you can't shake that, and it's partly the Conservatives' fault. I mean, first of all, they're in bed with the churchies big time, right? The evangelists and so on and so forth, and they can't, even if they were to say, hey, we're booting all these people out of the party, nobody would believe it, right? They just believe that there's that kind of Christian crazy right that's in control of the Conservative Party, and Trudeau's done his utter best to perpetuate that stereotype, of course.
yeah. Yeah, I get the feeling that these days what we're witnessing is governments, and I'm talking about of all stripes, all levels of government, where corruption is running rampant, and they don't really seem to care, and nothing seems to be done about it. Back in the day, there seemed you saw a lot more cabinet ministers stepping down or being
Yeah,
booted out because of something they did, not because the prime minister hated them, but
right.
because of something that they did. And today it's like, no, they're there.
Yeah,
No,
I know. And because I mean, they're not even hiding the corruption
no.
anymore.
Well, I know. That's what I'm
Right?
saying.
And isn't that there's a famous, I can't remember, probably a Russian guy, maybe might have even been Solzhenitsyn or whatever, said that the time to worry is not when they're covering up everything, but when they're doing it openly. You know, that's the time to really start worrying. And when you look at Bill C-11 and all the uh, threats to freedom of speech, and people are like, oh well, if the government knows what's best. No, the government doesn't know.
Well,
I don't want anyone. I don't want anyone censoring anything. Like, I mean, people go, "Oh, well, what about hate speech?" Well, how are you going to know who the hate speakers are if you don't let them speak? And once you let them speak, you can go, "Hey, did you hear what that guy said?" Right? But
yeah.
this whole notion, you're not getting rid of hate speech by taking it off the internet. You're just putting it where you can't find it, right? It's not like it goes away. It doesn't go away. It exists. It's just much more dangerous and subversive.
Comedian Glen Foster is my guest. You talk about governments getting away with things and blatantly lying and saying no, that's not
Oh yeah,
happening, and they're getting away. I mean, you take a look at what's happening right now in Russia with Putin. I mean, the man invades a country under the premises that he's going to denazify it,
yeah.
which is the stupidest thing he could have ever said. And he's now he's been found guilty in international courts of. I mean, he's breaking laws left, right, and center, and he doesn't give a rat's ass.
No,
He doesn't care.
no. And this is the perpetual war that Orwell talked about, you know? a state of perpetual war, and that's where we're at. And the world is for that. I sometimes think that they wanted to do this whole Illuminati take over the world business in 1984, but then the book came out and they had to delay it for another. If you read the book, boy, it's not so much a warning to the masses as a blueprint to the elite.
Yeah.
Ted Woloshyn returns in a moment.
Have you been tasked with the role of a state executor, or expected maybe in the future you will be? Well, if so, let me make your life a lot simpler by introducing you to my friend Debbie Stanley. Debbie is the founder of ETP Canada. They specialize in estate administration. Their goal simply is to help Canadian executors understand their role and how to deal with the loved one's estate. Let's face it, there's no school for this, but ETP Canada offers services such as executor support, estate accounting, and they have a new online course called Executor Ready. It's an engaging video designed to make estate administration easier and affordable. And those are two comforting thoughts during a stressful time. So call Debbie Stanley at 1-866-309-0387. That's 1-866-309-0387. Or you can get her at info@etpcanada.ca. That's info@etpcanada.ca. Do you have an upcoming wedding on your calendar? Hey, it's Ted Woloshyn for Tom's Place. If you're the father of the bride or a special guest who needs an elegant new suit or tuxedo, Tom will help you get ready for the spotlight. And if you're the lucky groom, Tom is a friend of the groom and the best man to help you dress the entire wedding party for your special day. Whether it's formal or informal, destination wedding, traditional or contemporary, tailored suits, or classic tuxedos with all the accessories, why rent a tux when it's so affordable to buy a classic that'll take you to events for years to come? Find out more at Tom's Place in Kensington Market. No one can dress you better or save you more than our wedding specialists. And don't forget, enter our wonderful wedding contest at toms-place.com to win a $500 credit for your wedding party outfits. Tom's Place will suit you.
Now back to Ted and his guest.
I know we're at this weird point in comedy. A comedian will say something on stage and it's just a joke, and somebody has their phone out, and then the internet loses its mind, and he should apologize, he should lose a gig. I've been doing this a long time. I can walk into a room and I know there are people in that room who might be a little bit offended by something I might say. Now, on the other hand, the white people will be the most offended people in the room. Because that's what we do now. We've appropriated everything else. The only thing left is outrage. Right? You're upset. Well, how do you think I feel about how upset you are? I don't think you're upset enough, quite frankly. I mean, considering what we've been through. All right, relax. I only make fun of white people. Or as I like to call them, people. Oh, please, has any white person ever said, I have this white friend. I'm white, what can I say? No, I'm asking, I'm white, what can I say?
We were talking earlier about trying to appeal to a younger crowd. Do you find that the crowds, because you've been around for a long time, people know who you are, you've established a great name for yourself, that people now follow you at concert to concert, and you can basically judge the kind of audience you're going to have? Like, that these are the kind of people who are going to be showing up?
I wish, but no. The thing is, I'm not someone who's on TV all the time. I've been on, once in a while, here and there. It adds up to a fair bit. But in terms of, I didn't have a weekly show. I wasn't part of 22 Minutes, any of these people that are, just on TV all the time. Mm-hmm. And so, that's part of the reason why I did the whole That Canadian Guy thing, to brand it, to make it easier for people so they wouldn't have to remember my name, because I knew it was only on once in a while type thing. But what you're talking about, now, here's an interesting thing that's been happening, though. So since I started doing more shows, during the pandemic, well, what you could, we were doing shows behind plexiglass for a while. That was
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
because the stage lighting would come through, reflect off you, bounce off the plexiglass. So if you were wearing if you're wearing any kind of light clothing, all you saw was your reflection in the plexiglass. So I quickly learned to wear as much black as I could so that I could see the crowd through my shadow type thing,
Yeah.
right? And the whole plexiglass was so stupid anyway, because I mean they'd have a piece of plexiglass and they'd have a corner where the pieces didn't even meet. So there's a huge gap anyway. You had to wear your mask until you got to the stage, then take your mask off, do the show, put the mask back on, leave the stage. There's so many of these stupid arbitrary rules that in hindsight are completely unnecessary.
Well, I think that the problem was that nobody knew how to deal with it because we had never really dealt with it, not in modern times. And so they were saying, well, why not try this? Why not try that? And they were making mistakes. And every time they made a mistake,
Yes.
the people who were totally against, who were the anti-vaxxers and the anti-maskers, would jump on any mistake that the government made and
Oh,
say,
for sure.
you see, it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy.
But well,
They give you give governments too much credit when when you start tossing around the word conspiracy because they're not that smart in most cases.
yeah, but in a lot of cases too, I think when people talk about conspiracy, I think that it's the government that are the puppets of the conspirators.
That whole situation, do you find that you define when you get into talking about masking and
Oh, I have some.
vaccine?
I have. Here's the thing: is I'm this the dilemma I'm going through now is I have some great material from the pandemic, since the pandemic, about the pandemic, but it's already kind of in the rearview mirror. So do I put it on the album or not? Because the album might come out, 6 months from now or whatever. And it's like, okay, well then it's already a year and a half. Like the truck convoy. The truck convoy is a year and something in the past,
Yeah,
despite the fact
yeah.
that I have great jokes about it, right? Like one of my depending on which side of the political spectrum, whether you would laugh at this or not, is we'd have had vaccines a lot sooner in this country. It's just that SNC Lavalin does not make one. There's no
Yeah.
we pharmaceutical company.
That was another scam too, eh? That whole we thing, and that just how did that
Unbelievable.
disappear? How did that just
It
disappear?
disappeared because COVID came along and distracted everybody from everything. That's how that disappeared. But yeah, it's just it. So, at a point, they wanted you to wear a mask during sex. You remember that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah. Well,
when I first heard that, I went, finally.
I thought we had. I'm sorry about that. I thought I
I think we
lost
had
you
a
there for a
drop.
second. Did we have
No,
a
I think we had
dropout
a.
there? We
I
may
think so,
have
yeah,
had.
because I couldn't hear you for
Okay,
a second. So,
I don't know how it works. It's all fucking technical, but anyway,
hey, you're not on the radio anymore. You can use an F bomb.
yeah, yeah. And I don't. That's the funny thing. People said you can do that when you start doing a podcast. And think, why? I mean, it's
Why exactly? So, okay, here's the thing. You see, I'm a generally clean comic. There is one F bomb, one on Unchecked,
yeah,
right? Just one. So I never usually run into trouble with language, but I always run into trouble with content and subject matter,
yeah.
and that's my own damn fault. I mean, I could do, happy cruise material, whatever, but it's no satisfaction for me,
No.
like unless there's danger involved, I don't seem to enjoy it.
Well, the interesting thing about using profanity in comedy is that if the real good comedians can get away with it because they've got the content that covers that.
Right.
You're laughing at the content, and if the F word pops up here and there and here and there and here and there, you're okay with it. It's the comedians whose content is so lame that they
Yeah.
have to lean on the F word to get any kind of reaction from the audience. There
I
is
call
a
it
big
comedy. I
difference.
call it comedy helper. Just
Yes, exactly.
the
Like
joke isn't
hamburger
working,
helper.
just throw a few F bombs in there, right? But here's
Yeah.
the thing: when I use an F bomb, I try every other word first, right?
Yeah.
The only is if this joke will not work without an F bomb, then I have to use an F bomb. It's
Yeah.
the joke, right?
Yeah.
But I don't just sprinkle them around and effing this and effing that. But I see plenty of comics who do, you
Yeah,
know? It just makes it harder when you're trying to clean it up for TV later. It throws the rhythm in your mind, like a clean comic can work dirty pretty easily.
that's
But
right.
a dirty comic has a hard time working clean because they've got that effing rhythm in their head, right?
You're right. Now, how do you react when you say something that is deemed controversial by some percentage of the audience, and you'll get laughter, pause, and then ooh? It's like they laugh and then they pass judgment. Well, you laughed,
Yeah.
which is your immediate reaction.
Yep.
So your immediate
Exactly.
reaction, your conscience and your subconscious are telling you that in fact that was funny. But then the guilt part of you is saying, "Well, I shouldn't have laughed at that, so now I'm going to have to unlaugh."
Yeah. I've got a whole okay, so on Unchecked, I have a whole chunk about I shouldn't have laughed at that. There's a whole chunk about I shouldn't have laughed at that. But what I always say is, don't laugh and then tell me it's not funny, because
That's
that's
right.
bullshit. You laughed, you made your decision.
That's right.
Laughter is not a conscious decision. It's an unconscious decision. And if
Yeah.
your unconscious is overriding your conscience, too bad. Either I tricked you or you genuinely, like, now there is a bit
Laughter.
of trickery. I'll admit that I engage in a bit of trickery sometimes, but at the same time, it's a genuine response, right?
It
So
is.
because we can use it. So this is one from Unchecked where I say here comedy is subjective, right? So what's funny to you might not be funny to anyone else,
That's
but it's
right.
funny to you. You might be a sick fuck, but it's funny to you. Now,
That's
how
right.
else could I do that joke? That's the only F bomb on the entire album, and no other word will work there. Not as
Yeah.
effectively. I could
No,
say
exactly.
bastard or whatever, but sick fuck covers it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So you've now sworn on my podcast twice as often as you swore on your own album.
I
Thanks.
got a third. I got
Thanks
a
for
third
that.
one if you want. I got a third one if you want it.
Yeah, we have to put out some sort of a warning at the beginning of this particular
Yeah,
episode.
morning, two
Gl-
white guys talking.
yeah, Glenn Foster
Two
is
older
is
white guys talking.
Glenn Foster is my guest. So you started doing comedy. You're like 22 years old. What were you doing before that? What were your plans for life before
Well, okay,
you?
so here's the thing. I started doing comedy in high school, like
Right,
high school variety shows.
right.
So I did a couple high school variety shows. My first time down to a Yuck Yucks was the original Yuck Yucks at Bay and Bloor, and
Mm-mm,
that was
that wasn't the original.
well,
The
no, the
original
church
was
basically. Okay, yeah,
519 Church.
right. Okay, so I started just after they moved into the Bay Bloor,
Yeah,
I guess, area, right?
yeah, yep,
And I came down for amateur hour, which,
yeah.
if you recall, they didn't have amateur night. They had amateur hour. It was after the regular show on a Monday night. And it was a school night for me, driving in from Oakville. And so the first time I went up, I really don't remember it, to be honest. I think I did something similar to what I've been doing in the high school variety shows, which is a bunch of not great impressions. I was doing Howard Cosell and Jackie Stewart doing a commentary on World War III. Uh,
It's a great
that's a
premise.
great day for a thermonuclear war. It's just silly stuff, right? And so I guess it went okay, and I don't really remember it. And then I went back a week later,
Yeah.
and don't remember that one either entirely. The third time I went up, I thought, I've been doing this same little routine. I must have done it 10 times by now. I should move on to other material. So I wrote an entirely new act, did not get a single laugh in the 5 minutes I was up there.
Uh,
It was dead silence. And then, I don't know if you recall at the time, they had the little TV up in the corner, and they played a video, this really bad grainy video of a train crash and a car wreck, and it's all these screeching, crashing sounds. And Breslin Mark Breslin, the owner of Yuck Yucks, actually got on oh, it's a disaster. Glen Foster is a disaster, ladies and gentlemen. And I didn't go back for 3 years, Ted.
really.
They owe me 3 years.
What were you going to do if you didn't end up doing what you're doing?
Oh, I was in advertising. I got into advertising. I took advertising in college, and I worked as a copywriter. That was
Hmm.
my first. Yeah, so I would have still been a copywriter. I actually took a leave of absence from the last agency that I worked at to go to California for a year, and never went back. So I could have been a Don Draper minus the booze and the chicks. But I knew, I wanted to be in advertising long before I even knew comedy was a profession. I didn't know comedy was a profession, but I knew advertising was because of the show Bewitched.
Yeah,
Remember Bewitched?
of course.
Right? Yeah,
Of
exactly.
course.
His job, so I watched Bewitched, and his job was he was an ad man. He was coming up with ideas and the, goofy promotions and everything else. And I thought, well, I can do that, because I was already doing sort of that kind of
Yeah, well, I
thing.
was going to say, I mean, it's a logical progression to go
Yeah.
from being an ad writer to being a comedian if you're writing your own stuff,
Yeah,
right?
and there's a lot of parallels too, because I mean, if you look at a commercial, it's probably about 30 seconds. An average joke for me, anyway, is about 30 seconds. There's a get their attention off the top and have a payoff at the end. I mean, that's a commercial, effectively, right?
Yeah,
So I mean, the jokes are little commercials, and the sale at the end, the call to action, is the laugh, right?
yeah.
So there is a lot of similarity there. I also married a witch, so that was. No, she's lovely. I just do the joke because it works.
Yeah.
We actually
Okay.
get along fine, me and my ex.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. That's nice to hear, actually.
It is nice, yeah. Yeah.
But do you make fun of her during your acts?
No, no. And you know what? I barely do anything personal on stage. All my comedy is third party observational. There's a few little personal things that snuck into uh Unchecked, uh about my dog, and a few other little personal things, but
Yeah,
on balance, my comedy is third party observer kind of thing.
yeah. Good stuff. You've got another album coming out sometime this year, hopefully, or will
I
it be
would think
next year?
sometime this year. Yeah, this sometime this year. I guess whenever I can get to it and get the material compiled and so on and so forth. Because it's hard when you're on your fifth album. You're like, okay, well, I can't really include stuff I've done on the previous four albums unless it's substantially different or heading a different. You know what I mean?
See, that's
So
unlike musicians. Musicians have benefits that comedians don't. For example, you could be a terrible musician, but once the song has come to a conclusion, people inevitably will applaud
yeah,
because they
oh
know
sure,
the song has come to an end. People don't fake applause. Musicians can put out one album, two albums, three albums, four albums, and then do a best of album
yeah,
with a
yeah.
compilation. And you've never seen a comedian put out five albums, and the sixth album is a best of album. And
Well, I
comedians,
could I
it,
could put out a best of, because, and I'll tell you why, because I mean, I have been doing this for about 40 years, and there's a lot of material from, say, 10 years in that a
hmm
lot of people still request, and I don't do it anymore. And part of the reason is, like, one of the, I used to do a lot of technology jokes, and those jokes are like the technology I'm talking about in those jokes is completely obsolete, and yet it's my most requested. Like, if someone sends me an email, they'll say, "Why don't you do this bit anymore?" And I say, "Because the technology doesn't
yeah,
even exist anymore, right?"
yeah,
But there are other times, like I say, when I'm going through these old videos and I look at stuff and I go, "Oh, well, that would work today. Why don't I bring that back?" Right?
okay.
Uh,
But
but
that's
there's also but I could do a best of, because there are people who, have seen my Just for Laughs performances and so on, who would like to maybe have all that on an album type thing, right?
yeah.
So it's possible.
It's just for laughs that you've appeared at 8 times. That's where the number eight
Eight
comes from.
times at Just for Laughs, two Comedy Nows,
Yeah,
5 or 6 Winnipeg Comedy Festival,
yeah.
Mike Bullard show, all kinds of Canadian stuff.
From that Canadian guy.
There you go.
So you'll be hitting the road soon.
Um, I I'm not so much hit the road anymore as just go out for a weekend kind of thing. The actual uh, long tour type stuff. I mean, I do one if there was one to do, but
Hmm.
you know,
What about corporate gigs?
well, those kind of corporate in general kind of dried up after the 2008 banking nonsense, right?
Hmm.
Because big companies are like, well, we got to cut something from the budget, and generally it was entertainment, and also the same parameters and check boxes and everything. And that's one of the reasons the album was called Unchecked, by the way, is all the boxes I don't check as
Hmm.
an older white male.
Yes.
Because they're always looking for young and new and ethnic, and that's fine, but it doesn't help in me at all, right?
Yeah.
And also, I've sort of started to get this, again, maybe shooting myself in the foot, whatever, poking the bear kind of. Corporate doesn't want that. They don't want that kind of material.
Right.
Cruise ships don't want that.
Right.
So kind of taking myself out of that market a little bit, but I'm working on something that might put me back in that market, and pardon the pun, but a TED Talk sort of thing
Hmm.
uh, about comedy, about my comedy specifically.
Right.
I could like I got all this video, like I could say, here's how I was doing it, here's what I changed, here's how it works now, here's like I can actually show the progression of a joke.
Yeah. And what was available and what was acceptable then and what is not acceptable now.
Oh, absolutely. I could absolutely do that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm doing now on stage is I'm doing a bit about the pandemic and third world countries in the pandemic, and how, you know, that whole 6 feet thing. That's a very North American 6 foot distance type thing, when there's places where people don't have 2 inches to themselves. And so during pandemics, they must be like, woohoo, check it out. Nobody here. Nobody here, nobody here, nobody here, nobody here. And that kind of gets them oohing a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And then I say, hey, this'll offend you. It just occurred to me, if I was doing this bit in the 90s, I'd be doing a bad Chinese accent for sure. And that sets me up. And then I say, I'm kidding. I do a great Chinese accent.
Yeah. Okay. That Canadian guy, Glen Foster, it is great chatting with you, my friend. Congratulations to you on 40 solid years of comedy. The latest album, titled Unchecked, is available. The next one coming out sometime, hopefully by the time your Christmas shopping comes around.
You can find all this on my website, thatcanadianguy.com, of course. Everything is there, all the links to everything. More than you ever need to know about me, that's for sure.
Okay. We'll do it again soon, my friend.
All right, thank you.
Well, that'll do it for another episode. Thanks very much for joining us, and we hope that you will continue to do so. Don't forget to drop by our website. It's www.tedwallishin.ca for your thoughts and your comments, and you can listen back on past episodes as well. In the meantime, don't forget, if you get a chance, go online and fill out your organ and tissue donation card. You could change or even save a life. In the meantime, have a great week.
The Ted Wallachin Podcast has been brought to you by ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. And Tom's Place, for the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices. It's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. The Ted Wallachin Podcast is produced by Becky Coles, that's me. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. To talk to Ted and for more information on his podcast and our sponsors, go to www.tedwallishin.ca.